Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagur ba'alecha mi yishkoin bahar kadshecha. Halech tamim u'foel tzedek v'doiver emes bilvavo. Lo ragel al l'shano lo asa l'reu ra'ah v'cherpa lo nasa al kravo. Nivze be'enav nimas v'esirei Adonai yichabed nishpa lahara v'lo yamir. Kaspa lo nasan b'neshech v'shoicha l'anachi lo lakach. Oise eile lo yimoit li'olam. Binyamin ben Avram, but we all knew him as Alex. I was thinking about a pasuk that would be most appropriate. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, Kvetuch Gimel. Giborei koyach oise devaro lishmaya bekol devaro. Those of great strength who do his word to listen to the voice of his word. It's interesting, the pasuk actually mentions Oise Devaro and then Lishmai B'Kol Devaro, as Klal Yisrael said for Kabbalah Satira, Nasa v'Nishma in that order. But I think Alex can be best described with this praise of Giborei Koyach. Person of immense strength in all areas, commitment to his family, commitment to Yiddishkeit. Pasuk tells us, the days of a person's life is 70 years, and if with strength, 80 years. He made it to the end of the 80 years, made it to his 89th, to his 90th year, past his 89th birthday. To be Mekayim, the idea of the Pasuk, which shows the tremendous gevura that he had. Baruch Hashem, we're mechutanim for over 22 years, and got to know him very well. A wonderful relationship. I have a lot more that I'd like to say, but I'd first like to ask the others who are speaking to speak first, and then I will wrap it up at the end. I'd like to first call on Rabbi Davidovich, the Rav of Haidt Jewish Center, where Alex was a member and davened there, and he had a very beautiful relationship, and I always spoke very highly of Rabbi Davidovich.
You have, in the world of shuls, living in a shul, being in a shul every day, you have the regulars in the shul, you have the rabbi, you have the gabbai, you have the people who you see every day, and then you have the furniture of the shul. And sometimes you don't even think about the furniture, it's just there. You notice when it's missing. And for all these years, I always thought of Alex as just being part of the furniture of the shul. He was there. He had an incredible but modest yet obvious simplicity to the fact that he was there. Seeing him coming to shul, whether alone or whether with Jeff, I would always think of that famous introduction to Ein Yaakov, that the main pasuk of the whole Torah is Esakeves echad tasa v'boker v'esakeves hasheni tasa bein ha'arbayim. That the central verse of the entire Torah is one offering in the morning, one offering at night. That kind of reliable consistency. But there was so much more than just that consistency. There was a depth, there was a seriousness to it that for people who would notice was admirable, even though it could be missed. I remember when COVID began and I started to give little shiurim online so that people could still stay in touch and hear Torah during those few months. I gave various types of classes, a lot of short things just on the Parsha or on whatever, like the upcoming Yom Tovim when Pesach was coming. And I gave a Gemara shir as well. And Alex called to tell me that he especially appreciated the Gemara shiurim. And that's something that I don't think I would have expected of him. I expected of his son, expected of his sons-in-law, expected of his grandchildren. But for him to come and tell me, Rabbi, I really want to hear more of those shiurim on Harius that you're giving, was something that was a delightful surprise at the time and led me to appreciate something that I think I had missed in the years prior. There is an interesting thread in the Parsha, in Parshas Shlach. After the whole story with the spies, you have another few mitzvos that round off towards the end of the Parsha. You have some mentions of Avodah Zarah, you have the mitzvah, one of the mitzvos of Shabbos, you have the mitzvah of Tzitzis, and they don't seem to be related. One way in which they are connected, and that they are also connected to the beginning of the Parsha, is that those mitzvos in different respects represent the idea of having a single mitzvah that is keneged kulam. Right? It's a fascinating idea. Even though we have 613 mitzvos, yet we know that there are certain mitzvos that stand out. We say Talmud Torah keneged kulam, Tzitzis, which somehow represents 613, are keneged kulam. Shabbos is keneged kol haTorah kula. Avodah Zarah is keneged kol haTorah kula. The idea that you could have a mitzvah, and yet that one mitzvah somehow represents the totality of it all. And in many ways that I observed, Alex was a person who, in the way that he went about his life, represented just kol haTorah kula. Not just the way that he and Betty lived their lives, but the way that they raised their children, the way that they respected and admired and were proud of their grandchildren, was something that was just the totality of it all. It wasn't that he stood out in a specific way. Even though the Gemara uses as a term of praise an expression, b'may have zohir tfei, which means that certain people stood out in the times of the Gemara, that people would ask, in what were you especially careful? In what were you especially scrupulous? In what did you shine? And yet, with Alex, I just felt that his whole life shone. And it wasn't like that one aspect jutted out or was more pronounced than another. But just from morning till night, Shachris min Chamariv, he was Zohir. He shone in every respect. And he set an example for those in the shul, even for people who didn't know his name, as the younger people were coming into shul, and might not even have noticed his name. Oh, he's just one of the guys who comes to shul. Like I said, the furniture. And yet he set that example. It's an example that I was very fortunate to witness for many, many years on a daily basis, and that his family was very fortunate to be raised under, and that all of us who are privileged to know him will have the joy and the honor of remembering. Yehi zichro baruch. B'olam havas hanetzach, v'cha Adonai Elohim dima me'al kol panim.
I'd like to call up his son, Reb David. He's the youngest of the three, but he's the son. He will go first.
Avi. Daddy. What an Aveda. What a loss. What a void. A loss for Mommy as a husband. He provided for her, made sure all her needs were taken care of. He's positive, supportive. A loss for us, the children, the grandchildren. A father, a Zaidi, who guided us, looked after us, protected us. A loss for myself, my chavrusa, for over 17 years, we learned together 6 days a week, almost never missed. He scheduled his whole day around our learning. When the time was to learn, he made sure to always be ready and prepared and waiting for the phone call. And around that, he worked around his day. Together, we had such accomplishments. We finished together Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. We're holding the middle of Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, middle of Hilchos Shabbos. And now I'm left without a chavrusa. You told me in the hospital, you can't wait to leave so we can start learning again. But you didn't make it out. I lost my father, my chavrusa, and I also lost my Rebbe. Not a Rebbe in words, a Rebbe in actions. He taught me so much from the way he acted, how to treat people, how to view people. He only saw positive, he didn't see negative. He treated people with proper respect, no matter who they were. He taught me the true translation of Avas Chesed, loving to do kindness. He always ran, he thought of ideas, he looked with love to try to help others as much as he could, with a smile, with his sincerity. Rav Chaim Volozhiner brings that the world was created L'hoil Achrini, to help other people. That's the purpose of the world that we're in, is in order to come to help other people. My father's essence was this Chazal, L'hoil Achrini. Everything was out to help others. He didn't look at himself. Everything was about everyone else. All the years when I used to come, many times I used to come to visit. Late at night, I used to come in from out of town, sometimes 2 a.m. He would wait up, even when he was in his 80s, till 2 o'clock in the morning, waiting for me to come. He would go outside, and he would help me with my luggage. He always, right away, took the heaviest luggage you could find. We find from Chazal, we find that the right side is the more choshev side, is the more important side. The question is that the heart is placed in a person on the left side. You would think the heart, which pumps for the person, it's the chaim of the person, you would think it should be on the right side. I saw a vart that the heart is created for the other person. The heart is for somebody else. When you're looking from the other side, when the other person is looking toward you, it's on the other person's right side, because you're supposed to give him your heart. That was my father, 100% selfless. He never focused on himself at all. Everything was everyone else. He gave his heart to everyone else. Rav Shimon Shkop, in his Akadoma to his Sefer, Shari Yosher, He explains how is it possible that somebody should be able to do v'ahavtecha kamocha, to love his fellow like himself. How is it possible to reach such a high level? And he explains that everyone has an ani, everyone has an I. A child, his I is I, and that's where it starts and ends. All he sees is himself. The ani, the I, is limited. He doesn't see past himself. When somebody reaches Gadlus, the greater he is, the more people become part of his ani. The more people, everyone else is part of him. He's not alone. Everyone else, his family, his neighbors, his kehillah, the whole Klal Yisrael. He views everyone in his ani, it's a part of himself. And as he treats himself on a high level toward himself with care, so automatically he'll treat everyone else on the same level because they're all encompassed in his ani. I'd like to add to the Vart, my father, I think, didn't just stop that the Acherim, that everyone else was part of his ani. I think his ani was batal to the Acherim. His ani was nullified to everyone else. He wasn't equal to everyone else. He was selfless. He had nothing, no focus whatsoever for himself. Everything was everyone else. Even in his old age, in his 80s, he was putting up the sukkah by himself. He didn't want to ask anybody for favors. He didn't want to ask anybody. He didn't want to bother anyone. Recently, he could barely breathe, and he drove to the emergency room by himself. I asked him later on, why did he do that? He could have got somebody to drive him. He said, I don't bother people. But when it comes to him towards others, he volunteered, he found, he offered, he looked to be able to help other people in any way. He used to always tell me, do what's good for you and don't think about me. When it came to coming from out of town, I came a few times recently, and each time he told me I should better stay at home. Your family needs you. He gave up on his own. He gave up on himself because he cared about others. This past Shabbos, I spent with him in the hospital. He made many phone calls to my mother to try to tell her, to convince me that I shouldn't come. Dova's going to be bored in the hospital. What's he going to do the whole Shabbos? Let him stay with you. Let him stay with the family. He wasn't looking for himself. He didn't mind that he's going to be all by himself in a situation, in a bed, that he can't move with no one there. He cared about everyone else. He had a midah of shtika. He was quiet. Chazal say, shtika yafa, shtika is from the greatest midas. He had plenty what to say. He had plenty of deis and opinions. He didn't put upon anybody else his ideas. He let everyone else talk. He heard everyone else's ideas. Another nekuda of shtika, that he was quiet. He never complained about anything. Even the recent past year, he suffered tremendously. He never complained. He had the midah of anhava. He was a humble person. He did so much, and he never gave himself any credit. Everything was batznei alechas. Everything was done quietly, privately. Not that anybody should know about it. It should all be done secretly. He wasn't looking for anybody to give him honor. He wasn't looking for anybody to give him credit. He was berech min hakoved. He ran away from honor. I remember wanting to give him Sandakais, a very important honor, and he told me he should give it to the other side, give it to somebody else. The simchas that I made, he tried getting out of sitting at the head table. He didn't want to sit. He didn't want to have the honor. Chazal teach us, Kol ha-berech min ha-kovid, ha-kovid redef acharov. Whoever runs away from honor, the honor runs after him. He ran away from kovid. Where is the kovid that ran after him? I feel that the kovid that ran after him is the family. Ein kovid al ha-Torah. The real, true honor is Torah. People are shomer Torah, u'mitzvahs, people who keep Torah, loimdei Torah, b'nei Torah. That's the true cover, that's the true honor. He brought up children, grandchildren, his great-grandchild, Doris of b'nei Torah. He told me a few days ago, he feels that he was mamale his tafkid. He feels that he completed his purpose on the world by having such a beautiful family. His children and his grandchildren, even his great-grandchild, he told me. And he loves every single one of them. The Mishnah talks about kinav ha'tayv ha'kovid, mitzdinas adam and oilam, people who run after luxuries, people who are jealous, and honor. These things are bad for a person. He didn't have any of these qualities. He lived a very simple life. He was samech b'chelkai. He was happy with what he had. He wasn't looking for anything. He didn't feel that he didn't have something. Not only was he happy with what he had, he was happy for everyone else. He was able to forgin. He was able to be happy for somebody else's lot. It didn't bother him. He was, on the contrary, he was very happy for everyone else. And he was simple. He didn't need anything. It says in the pasuk, "Tevachres dover mer yishisai." It's better the end more than the beginning. Before Hashem asks, why is the end better than the beginning? Why is the end of things better than the beginning of things? Farshim say that if a person is born, when a person is born, we don't know what's going to happen with him. He could go any direction. There's all kinds of directions he could go. By the end, everything is clear. Everything is finalized in the person's path. That he could have teiv achrisai, merishisai. He could have a better end than in the beginning. My father was born in Europe. His father was killed. He learned Aleph Beis in DP camp, came to America, no yeshiva. Who would have dreamt that he would come so far, become so great, grow so high? The Gemara says, Hill's mechayves aniyim. Hill was poor and he learned Torah. He obligates all the poor people in the world that if he was able to learn in his situation, he obligates everyone else. My father, coming from where he came, he's mechayiv. No matter what a person's youth was, it obligates where he came to, how he built a family, chosh of a family. He himself finished Yisha Sidrei Mishnah. He went to the Daf Yomi Shir. He finished the full machzor. Plus, halfway through Mishnah Berurah. So much accomplishment. When a child is born, when the neshama comes into the world, the neshama is aching. The neshama is crying. The neshama would rather be with the malach learning. The neshama would rather be in the alyonim. And he's forced to come down to the tachtainim, into this world. But the people, everyone's very happy. It's a big simcha. A baby is born. On the contrary, when a person leaves the world, everyone is crying, everyone is sad. But the neshama knows it's going back to the alyonim. The neshama is happy. Daddy's neshama is going to be in a better place. Tishrin Meir Tziyesher, for Mommy and the whole Mishpacha. Bila Mavos Netzach, Mocha Hashem Elokim Dimu Miyal Kopanim. Amen.
I'd like to ask Rabbi Shmuel and Bramsky to come up.
It's very hard for me to talk about my shver, but I'll try to put it together a few words that come from my heart. My shver was born in Yugoslavia before the war. His father was taken right away to the camps, and Chmona Litzlan, we know the end, what happened. His mother was left alone with a bunch of children, raising them, running country to country to try to escape the big wrath, the Nazis that were going on then. And her life was very hard, raising these children. They came to the Cleveland after the war. They settled here. And my father-in-law, he was taking care of his mother. All the children did, but my father-in-law seems to be, got married later, and he even, after his marriage, took in his mother into his house, which isn't easy, just getting married and having your mother live with you, but she did. And he was mechabed his mother with the gresta cover that was possible. He gave her the most devotion. He was warm to her. He took care of her. At the end, the other family members took over the mother, and he couldn't anymore. But until he was able to, I think Aunt Leah took him at the end. Until he was able to, he took care of her. He understood the importance of respecting his mother. He came to Cleveland, and he raised a nice family here, and he raised them al taharas hakodesh with purity. He sent them to the right chadorim, to the right yeshivas. He did everything he could that they should go in the right ways. When the neshama leaves this world, it doesn't, in essence, leave this world. It leaves down here a pair of legs that continue walking. The legs are the children. He raised the son, David Moshe, who was a Marbitz Torah in Lakewood, learning, steiging. His whole life is Torah-dik. He was in Koil for years, and my other Choshev Shvagad Ben Chavdel Ben Chaim L'Chaim, Rabbi Stoll, so sein gesund. Also, Marbitz Torah, he gives over Daf Yomi every night in the Koil. And these are the peiros, the fruits of his labor that he worked for, that he tried, and he did the best he could to leave over such a family, such a legacy. These legs will continue. These are continuing, giving him gifts in heaven, in Shemayim, their Torah, their mitzvahs, the continuation of the Torah and the mitzvahs that will be performed from these chashuv future generations. We were by his bedside 2 days before. My brother-in-law just mentioned. He said that I did my purpose in this world. I left over my generation. I did what I was supposed to. He said a very heart-wrenching thing at that moment. My wife was crying next to his bedside. And he turned to her and he said, I'll tell you something that my father told me. He said, you have to have amunah. You have to believe in Hashem. His father told him that before he passed away, and that was the message he told her. He lived his life with amunah. He believed, and even through dark times, he believed in Hashem. His heart was with Hashem. He cared about what was right. He tried to always understand truth. That was a very important thing in life. He didn't go for falseness. He cared very much that things should be on target and things should be true. I also have to mention at this point the amount of Torah that he learned. He was such a Torah-dicker person. He went every single night for years. Before COVID hit, he didn't miss one night. He went to my shvogers, my brother-in-law Shir, to hear the Daf Yomi. He finished Shas. He learned every single night. When I say every single night, it didn't make a difference if the weather was warm, if the weather was cold, if there was a snowstorm or how he felt. He would clean his car off in a snowstorm, go in the car, and go to Shir. And that was his life. And he continued learning Torah every afternoon, some evenings. I'm not sure the schedule with his son David Moshe. They continuously learned together Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. They learned a lot of Mishnah Berurah together. He learned a lot. He tried a lot. This is a Holocaust survivor that he really didn't have the time frame before the war to really delve into as much learning, but he caught up more than some of us can even imagine. His whole life, he cared. He really did. He cared about Torah very much. He cared about Mishpacha very much. He was unbelievable with his Kavod Habriyos, his respect for humankind, for people. There are plenty of times we would get together at family simchas or occasions. He wouldn't sit down. He would say, others should sit. Why should I sit? He never considered himself a human being to even want to sit down. He lived for others. He was selfless. He didn't care about himself. I remember at my brother-in-law's Vart, he just made a simcha. He was standing there. He was very weak. His face was pale. He was extremely weak. And he was standing for almost an hour. I kept on begging him to sit down. He refused. He refused to sit. He said, no, I want others to sit. Then, all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, miraculously, there was a chair next to him. He fell down. He fainted and fell down. I gave him a glass of water. He'd go to a simcha. He wouldn't even eat. He wouldn't take a piece of kugel. He wouldn't take anything. He says, others have to eat. He cared about everybody. Everybody meant a lot to him. In Yiddish they call a shver. He's hard. But I have to say that he was not hard. I would call him gring. He was easy. He was an easy person. He was easy to get along with, easy to deal with, easy to have relationship with, never was upset. He had real good, authentic, good midos. At this point, ich will beten Mechila bei mein Schwer. Ich will beten Mechila mit bestimmt die ganze Mishpache. Tome Chas v'Shalom, man hat Pegeir beCovid gewen, man soll so gewinnen dein Covid. Ich weiß, als das nicht gekehrt wegen dein Covid, es ist nicht angegangen, aber mit Bete Mechila, Tome zu gewinnen Zeiten, was man dir nicht gegeben, die richtige Covid. Ich bete Teire schwer, bete sich aus bei der Kisse der Covid, Für die Schwieger, sie soll sein gesund und sie soll haben Koyach weiterzugehen. Und bet sich aus für die ganze Mischproche, als man soll haben Poschete Koyches zu gehen und man soll können gehen und eine Drochen und eine Wegen, wo das uns ausgelernt. Teire schwer, ich will mehr sein, als alle Jahre mit dir es gewinnt, mit den höchsten Punkten, mit Scholle und Beschalve gewinnt mit dir zusammen. Letztlich ist schwer für uns alle, der Ebische soll helfen. Soll sein Säufikeit, Luchot Zoriseinu, soll sein ein Säufikeit für all unsere Zorris. Bet bei der Kisa Covid, soll ausgelöst werden von dem finsteren Goles. Moch Hashem dimmer mi alkoponim, bilo v'movis l'netzach.
My son Center.
The parsha we're going to learn tomorrow. So they wanted to send Meraglim, Bnei Yisrael. They want to know what's Ma'aretz Hashmenehi Imroza Hayish Be'etzimayin. So just imagine to ourselves for a moment. Somebody was shipwrecked and landed on a deserted island. And a plane comes overhead and announces that I'm going to save you, I'm going to take you back to habitation, take you back to people. So the guy responds back and says, well, please let me know what's going to be the quality of the place that I'm going to. You think he's a Meshugana. He's here, he's deserted on an island. Bnei Yisrael are walking in the desert. They don't have a house. They've been wandering around. And they say, oh, one second, before we go to Eretz Yisrael, we need to know, Maha'aretz Hashmenehi Imroza. You're going back to live somewhere. You're going to have a house. Just go. Rabbi Yisrael Nandik says that we have to understand what was the quality of life, what was the tzura of life that Bnei Yisrael had in the Midbar. Their needs were taken care of, but on even more so, the ruchnius needs. They were living a ruchniistic paradise. And here they wanted to know what's going to be. We're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Our ruchnius is going to suffer. We're going to have to work to keep our ruchnius level. We have to work to be gashmius comfortable. It's better stay in the midbar. We're really taka homeless. But at least our ruchnius, and the life is good. It's a ruchnius paradise. It's not life. Life is, the purpose of life is to overcome the challenges. When you have a challenge and you overcome it, that is life. If we didn't have challenges, there would be no purpose in life. And that was what Bnei Yisrael were missing, and that was the chet of the Meraglim. Everybody, or the past couple speakers, Maspidin, discussed different milas, different midas that Mashver had. I think there's an underlying current for us to be able to take to heart. There were many challenges at the age of 6, to have his hometown invaded by the Germans. His father was taken away when he was 6 or 7 years old, running away, pretending that they weren't really Jewish. He was telling me, and told us numerous times, but just a couple days ago, how he slept up in a mountain using a rock as a pillow as they were trying to cross over into safer territory. After the war, he came to one of the DP camps in Italy, and he had no Jewish education. He hadn't known anything. He was again, those 4 years, they were running away, and he didn't even know Aleph Beis. So he said at that time he thought it was a rabbi. I forget, it was not a rabbi, he said, but there was some from person there who would help the boy say Moida Ani, taught him Aleph Beis, taught him how to read, taught him how to daven. And he said that he pushed through, and that's really what helped him start being able to have a kesher with learning. This midah of pushing through and overcoming challenges that were presented to him was not only in his ruchnius, was not only in his personal life. When he was working, he retired. I think he was 80 years old when he retired, but close to. He worked for many years at the Case Western Reserve University. He was fixing the lab equipment over there for what he called the broadfressers. And we know he complained about how the way things were and they functioned, but he always figured out a way to deal pleasantly, sweetly with the challenges presented. His personality was a amazing blend of pleasantness, sweetness, but he had a real stubbornness, a real drive, a real push on himself to get things done. So sometimes if you have that push, you demand it of others. He didn't demand it of anybody else, but he demanded of himself that push to get things, to go beyond the challenges presented. He learned a little bit while he was working, but then after David got married and they started having a kviyas itim, mamash, in the middle of supper time. I don't know who gets more credit for that, but they finished Jesus Shiddur Mishnahs, everybody heard, and after the Siyam Hashas, I guess close to 14 years ago, my shvager convinced him that I understand Daf Yomi is going to be too fast-paced, it may be difficult for you, but go, at least if you gain a quarter of what's told to you, it'll be worthwhile. He came for at least 10 years. Every day he would sit almost across from me, and we went through a machzer and some, learning the daf. It was all good the days that he didn't open his mouth. The days that he opened his mouth were quite a challenge. His vast yedias, he would start quoting me from Mishnayos, asking Kashas how the Gemara worked with the Mishnah. His yedias in Torah grew tremendously. He pushed. He really didn't have the background, and he pushed to go through it. A culmination or a dogma of this was just 10 days ago, or almost 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago would be tonight. That he was in the ICU, and my wife and I wanted that he should be able to say Kiddush. But no one's going to bring him the Kiddush, not going to be able to make Hamaitzi. I convinced him that Shabbos day I had a bar mitzvah in Cleveland Heights, and Cleveland Heights is mamish next door to Cleveland Clinic, so I'll be there Shabbos day. It's mamish, it's not a far walk. But Friday night, so I drove down after early Shabbos, and that way I brought him his Kiddush and Hamaitzi, and he's stuck flat on his back in the ICU. One hand connected to a bunch of things, and he couldn't move it. He had one hand that he could move. He couldn't really even tip the cup to drink because it would spill all over him based on his position with a straw. And I told him, I said, Daddy, at least you can make Kiddush. And I brought you to a Bukloch, you can make Hamaitzi. The chiyas that came out of him when he started saying, Kivanu v'charta, we're in ICU, and the singing of it and the out loud, which I felt like the nurses would come to listen. But to push through the challenge, here he was stuck in a hospital bed, had just gone through a procedure to try to save his life, and found out that couldn't be. He had to go on something in the interim. and then maybe he would be able to have a follow-up procedure. And it could have been a massive of Yush, and he stuck flat on his back. But to push through, and the connection with Torah and mitzvahs that pulled him through is something that we could definitely, take to heart from his life. There's two other points on behalf of myself, my brother-in-law, and the other siblings. I wanted to thank Aunt Leah for the dedication the past couple of weeks. I would show up at the hospital multiple times, and she was sitting there. When I came down on Shavuos, second day Shavuos, and my shver had just gone through procedure number 1, and Leah was in the waiting room to follow up and see how her brother was doing. Multiple times we met there, and I know your relationship with him goes way before my relationship. You climbed the mountains in Yugoslavia together, but still, I wanted to say thank you. Daddy, there were many times that we had the tremendous chus that you were able to stay in our house for Yom Tovim. You always pushed back. You didn't want to come. You inconvenienced us. So we had to set up the room and tell you that it's all set up and ready for you to come. I just want to ask Mechila, for myself, for the Mishpacha, if we didn't treat you properly, and especially over the past few weeks, I hope that everything that we did was b'derech kavod, and I hope that all the eitzes that we gave were the correct ones as we tried to deal with the delicate situation. If they weren't, we ask you for your Mechila. Yehi Zichrei Baruch.
Most of them, just want to add one or two short points. The reason, as will be announced, the shiva is going to be at Sandra and Rochel's house on 2542 Claver, is because Alex and Betty never got air conditioning in their house. I guess if you slept on a stone when you were 6 years old, you don't need air conditioning the rest of your life. The fact that he wouldn't have anybody help him with anything, everything he had to do himself. One point that wasn't mentioned is that they always made Pesach at home until just the last couple of years, and he had a Pesach stove, and I asked Sender, how's he moving that? And Sender would say, well, he's doing it himself. He would stuff the Pesach stove into the kitchen. I'm talking till about 2 or 3 years ago, till he was about 86 years old. I've mentioned to many people the last couple of days about, he would be running around and said, many people told me that they saw him when they were shopping. He was out shopping. He did everything himself. Wouldn't want anyone to do anything for him. Talking about his great advancement in learning. About 10 years ago, I gave a Minchas Chinuch shir Sunday morning for 3 years, I don't remember. And he came every Sunday morning. For those who are familiar with Minchas Chinuch, it's not like even going through just regular Daf Yomi. And he didn't have the background, but did he have a sharp mind? Wow! I mean, he copped everything that was said, would question it and discuss it. It was something unbelievable to have him participate in that shir, to see the brilliance that he was able to grasp and understand. But because of circumstances and coming over and waiting, I guess, for the right beshert, he didn't get married till he was 42. And he was zoiche to live long enough to have a great-grandson. And at the bris of his great-grandson, we spoke. And wow, was he ever besimcha. Couldn't he never imagine he would get there. He also mentioned I visited him a couple of times in ICU. And it was mentioned the fact that he felt very content with his life. Baruch Hashem, he said, a beautiful mishpacha, Ma'amed Doris, Yesharim, Mevorach. Mr. Hashem, he should be a Yosher for the whole family, especially for his wife, and for Klal Yisrael. Should be Zeicha to Yeshuas and Nechamos. Be the Mavas on Nesach, Malchus, Shem, Akim Dima, Me'al Grants, Shmuel Abramovitz, to say the Kelmalei, please. Everyone, please rise.
El Molech Hachamim Shoichein Bameroboboimim Hametzei Menuchonechoyino Our Kanefei Hashechiyino Ubimavois Kidoishim Ubotoirim Kizoyarokia Mazhirim es nishmaz Binyamin ben Avraham Sheholach v'yoylo b'moei Marbusha mishbuchu Yitain tzidoko B'li neder b'yad hazekurois Nishmo b'bozoi B'gan Eden Tehei Minu b'buchosoi L'chein v'alurachamim Yastirehu V'seisel kenofof Liyovoilomim Oy v'yitzro Yerachayim es nishmo b'bosoi Adoinoi hu nachavosoi Hoy v'yonuach al mishkovoi B'sholom b'noi ma'alumein.
Continue and proceed to Mount Olive Cemetery, and Shiva will be at 2542 Claver Road.